It's my honor to present one more award today. It is with great pride that we award the Cal Poly President's Medal of Excellence to former U.S. Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta. The President's Medal of Excellence is the highest honor awarded at Cal Poly and is awarded at the discretion of the President. There have only been 8 previous recipients of the President's Medal of Excellence, and today we are honored to add Leon Panetta to that distinguished group of individuals. Unanimously confirmed in 2011 by the U.S. Senate as the 23rd Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta capped a 50-year career in public service at the highest levels of government. As Secretary of Defense, he established a new defense strategy, led U.S. forces in 2 wars, and opened up opportunities for everyone to serve in the military. Prior to his appointment as Secretary, Panetta served as Director of the CIA, where he successfully led the operation that brought Osama bin Laden to justice. Secretary Panetta began his public service career in 1964 as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army, receiving the Army Commendation Medal, and then served as a legislative assistant to U.S. Senator Tom Kuchel. In 1969, he was appointed Director of the Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, where he was responsible for enforcing equal education laws. Elected to Congress in 1976, Secretary Panetta represented the California Central Coast District, including Cal Poly, for 16 years and created the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. In 1993, he was sworn in as Director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget for the Clinton administration and was later appointed White House Chief of Staff, working to achieve a balanced federal budget. In 1997, Secretary Panetta returned to his hometown of Monterey to establish and co-direct the Panetta Institute for Public Policy, a nonpartisan, not-for-profit study center that seeks to inspire women and men to live lives of public service. Leon Panetta. Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of the entire Cal Poly community, and with the authority vested in me by the trustees of the California State University, it is my distinct honor to present you with the President's Medal of Excellence in recognition of your career and service to the Central Coast, California, and our nation. Please welcome Secretary Panetta as our keynote speaker. Please congratulate him and welcome him to the podium.
Thank you very much, President Armstrong, faculty, staff, students, and families. It's an honor to be here to join in the celebration of your graduation as the class of 2016. I'm honored to be here, first of all, because I've had a long relationship with Cal Poly, going back to the time when I represented this area in the Congress. It was almost 40 years ago, and a lot has changed. I mean, at that time, this was clearly a smaller campus. Students communicated by actually talking with one another. There were dances called mixers. Drive-in wasn't a bad date. And Cal Poly Royal was more than just a rodeo. Today, obviously, a lot of things have changed. It's a different world, and all of you as graduates know that world better than anybody. I'm reminded of a story that I often tell of a professor who won the Nobel Prize in a very intricate area of physics law. And he was going throughout the state of California giving exactly the same lecture on this complex area of physics. And one day they were headed, he and his chauffeur were headed to Fresno, and his chauffeur leaned back and said, "You know, Professor, I've heard that address so many times, I think I could give it by memory myself." And the professor said, "Well, look, they don't know me that well in Fresno. Why don't you put on my suit and I'll put on your chauffeur's uniform and you give the speech?" And they did that. The chauffeur got up, spoke for an hour, didn't miss a beat, and got a standing ovation at the end of the lecture. And the professor, dressed as a chauffeur, couldn't believe, he was in the audience, couldn't believe what had happened. But then somebody raised their hand and said, "Professor, that was a very interesting address on a complex area of physics law, but I have a few questions." And he went into about a 3-paragraph question that included some mathematical formulas and equations and said, "What do you think about that, Professor?" And there was a long pause. The professor looked at him and said, "You know, that's about the stupidest question I've ever gotten. And just to show you how stupid it is, I'm going to have my chauffeur answer it out here in the audience." Lots of chauffeurs in this audience. I'm also honored because of the CSU system, and Cal Poly is part of that great system. I'm proud of the Panetta Institute and our relationship with CSU. Our goal is to inspire young people to get involved in public life, and students throughout the CSU system, and also students in particular from this campus, Cal Poly, participate in our programs, participate in our internship program in Washington, our leadership program, our student lectures. It's truly wonderful to have Cal Poly participate. You are recognized as one of the best campuses in the nation. Understand how important that is. Learn by doing is your code word. And lastly, I'm honored because of all of you, the graduates who this day will receive your degree. And I want to say to all of you, my deepest congratulations. You made it. You made it. And I know that your family and your mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and others are just saying, "Thank God they made it. Thank God you made it." You've earned your degree, and today, in many ways, you take the first step in fulfilling the dream of a better life. That's the American dream. It's the dream that we all want for our children. I've had the privilege of living that dream. I'm the son of Italian immigrants who came to this country in the early 30s. Little education, little language ability, but they managed to make their way through this country to Monterey, settled in Monterey during the war years. My father started a restaurant, worked hard, early morning, late at night. My brother and I worked in that restaurant. My earliest recollections were washing glasses in the back of that restaurant. My parents believed that child labor was a requirement. And then my dad sold the restaurant and bought some land in Carmel Valley and planted a walnut orchard. And again, my brother and I were out there working with my dad, doing irrigation and hoeing and all the things you do on a farm. As those trees grew older, my father used to go around with a pole and hook and shake each of the branches, and my brother and I used to be underneath collecting the walnuts. When I got elected to Congress, my Italian father said, "You know, you've been well trained to go to Washington because you've been dodging nuts all your life." A lot of truth to that. That American dream is something I used to ask my father about all the time. Why would you travel all of that distance to come to a strange land? They came from a poor area in Italy, but they had the comfort of family. Why would you leave all of that to travel all of that distance to come to a strange land? My father had an answer which I've never forgotten, which was that my mother and he truly believed they could give their children a better life in this country. That is the American dream. That's what we want for our children, and hopefully what you will want for your children as well. Unfortunately, in a recent poll that the Panetta Institute took of college students throughout the country, we were disappointed to learn that 73% of the students that were polled said that it would be harder for their generation to have a better life than what their parents' generation was able to have. And I realized, look, there are a lot of concerns. Concerns about our economy, concerns about the political dysfunction in Washington, concerns about a bizarre and crazy politics that we're going through right now. But this nation, its people, have always overcome adversity. My parents had to deal with the worst economic depression in the history of this country. They had to deal with a world war that consumed this country and the rest of the world. And yet they worked hard, and they made that dream come true for their children. And it can come true for you as well. But you have to fight for it. You have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be willing to work hard in order to make it happen. I had a Jesuit at Santa Clara University that told me, Leon, God gave you life, but it's up to you to determine what kind of life you will have. And for that, you have to fight for it. And he backed it up with a story that I thought made the point of a rabbi and a priest who decided they would get to know each other a little better. And they thought if they went to events together, they could talk and learn about each other's faith. So one evening, they went to a boxing match. And just before the bell rang, one of the boxers made the sign of the cross. The rabbi nudged the priest and said, "What does that mean?" The priest said, "It doesn't mean a damn thing if he can't fight." Ladies and gentlemen, we bless ourselves with the hope that everything's going to be fine in this country. But very frankly, it doesn't mean a damn thing unless we're willing to fight for it. Look, those are the values that I was raised with. The values that our forefathers had, the values that our pioneers had, the values that our immigrants had. They're the values that made this the greatest country on earth. And whether this remains the greatest country on earth will be determined by whether or not we embrace those values in the future. I think we're at a turning point in this country. Your class of 2016, I think this year kind of marks a point at which we can go one of two paths. I honestly believe one path could be an American Renaissance, an America that has a strong economy, strong growth, an America that has tremendous capacity for the kind of innovation and creativity that we honored here today. New technologies in robotics, in mapping the human genome, in self-controlled vehicles, in new sources of energy, in new approaches to dealing with space, advances in information technology with cloud capability, an educated and skilled workforce that can deal with the challenges of the 21st century, leadership that is willing to lead and to govern, to discipline our budget, to reform our tax system, to control the costs of entitlement programs so they can be sustained for the future, Invest in rebuilding our infrastructure. If we're going to have a strong economy, you need a strong infrastructure. And provide opportunities for all to succeed in a global economy. We could have a leaner and more agile defense force that could still be the strongest defense force on the face of the earth to support our world leadership in a dangerous world. Or we could be an America in decline, in constant crisis after crisis, politically dysfunctional, unable to govern, divided by our fears, our hatreds, our prejudices, unable to protect our most basic freedoms, our economy, our national security. That's the story of the downward spiral that other failed empires throughout history have gone through. What path we take will be determined by whether we are willing to fight for a better America, whether we are willing to govern our democracy by leadership, not crisis. I tell the students at the Panetta Institute, in a democracy we govern either by leadership or by crisis. And if leadership is there and willing to take the risks associated with leadership, and please make no mistake about it, if you're going to lead, you're going to have to take risks. And if you do that, you can avoid crisis. But if leadership is not there, then make no mistake, we will govern by crisis in this country. And that's what we do today, crisis after crisis. You can do that, but there's a price to be paid. And the price is that we lose the trust of the American people in our democracy. I've seen Washington at its best, and I've seen Washington at its worst. The good news is I've seen Washington work. I've seen Republicans and Democrats working together to find consensus, to govern. When I was elected to Congress, Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts was the Speaker of the House, a Democrat's Democrat. But he worked with Bob Michel, the minority leader from Illinois. They had their political differences. They fought each other in elections. But when it came to the issues facing this country, whether it was a Democratic president or a Republican president, they worked together to solve problems. They worked together. And during that time, working with them, we were able to pass immigration reform, to pass Social Security reform, to pass a balanced budget, to pass tax reform, energy bills, because governing was good politics. Governing was good politics. Today, in 50 years that I've been in public life, I have never seen Washington as dysfunctional as it is today. Divided, partisan, a lot of blame to go around for both parties. But the result is gridlock. Gridlock. The inability to deal with immigration reform, the inability to deal with the budget. You've got a $19 trillion debt that we're facing in this country, and a debt that could increase by another $8 to $10 trillion in the next 10 years. They can't agree on funding for infrastructure. They can't agree on trade. They can't agree on war authority for the president. They can't agree on filling a Supreme Court vacancy. Leadership by crisis is no way to run a country. And it's no way to deal with a dangerous world. We are living in a world in which there are a number of flashpoints, more than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Any one of those flashpoints could result in a miscalculation that could result in greater conflict. We're involved in a war on terrorism. We have failed states in the Middle East. We have an authoritarian regime in Iran that continues to support terrorism and instability. We have an unpredictable regime in North Korea that's testing nuclear weapons, testing ICBMs. We've got an unpredictable leader. The only person he gets along with is Dennis Rodman, for goodness sakes. We've got a Russia that's involved in a new chapter of the Cold War, with Putin being much more aggressive in the Ukraine and in Syria. You've got territorial claims by China in the South China Sea. And we have a growing danger of what I call the battlefield of the future, cyber attacks that can virtually cripple this country, take down our power grid, take down our financial systems, our government systems. That's a reality. All of these challenges are taking place at a time when there are questions about our resolve, whether we will stand by our word, whether we can govern ourselves, whether we have the resources for defense or for any of our needs in this country. Let me just tell you that as you look at whoever you decide to vote for President of the United States, there are two tests you've got to consider seriously. Can that president break the gridlock in Washington and govern this country and deal with the issues that we need to deal with if we're going to have a strong democracy? And can that president provide strong world leadership in a dangerous world? I believe in American leadership. We face crisis. We face recessions, we face depressions, we faced world wars. And somehow we have always risen to the occasion. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the real strength of America doesn't lie in Washington. It lies in you, the people of this country, in your resilience, your common sense, and your willingness to fight. That's our strength. As Secretary of Defense, I saw those values in the men and women in uniform that serve this country, that are willing to fight and die for this country. I saw those values in the SEALs that conducted the operation to go after bin Laden, 150 miles into Pakistan at night, 2 helicopters going in to attack a compound where we really didn't know whether bin Laden was there or not. But they did it. They accomplished the mission, and they sent a clear message to the world that nobody attacks this country and gets away with it. Nobody. And let me tell you something. If there are men and women who are willing to fight and die for America, then surely our elected leadership could use a little bit of that courage in order to govern this country. But it also means something else, that if there are men and women who are willing to fight and die for America, then you have to be willing to assume your responsibility as citizens, to fight to make the American dream real for yourselves and for your children. You've got to be willing to engage, to be part of the battle to protect our democracy. What does that mean? It means that you cannot trap yourself and stick away from the rest of society, hide in your iPhone with tweets or blogs or Facebook posts that make each of you islands in a sea of humanity. You've got to be willing to engage, to listen to others, to look into their eyes, and to understand what really makes them tick. We have lost that essential conversation that is so critical to understanding one another. It means that we have to embrace free speech, not shut it down. Free speech is the best defense against bad government. The best defense against bad government. Politicians ought to be subject to criticism. You need to listen to the views you support, and you need to listen to the views you oppose. That's what free speech is all about. A Nobel laureate pointed out that no democracy with a free press and free speech has ever endured famine, and that's true. It also means that all of you owe a duty to this country to serve in some capacity. Serve this country in some capacity. Frankly, I support the idea of a national service system that would give you the opportunity to serve this nation in some capacity, either in education or health care or conservation or in the military, and in exchange, get funding for your education. Service is a better way to fund your education than embracing a $1.3 trillion student debt that we have in this country. Let me conclude with a story about when I was director of the CIA. I visited a place in Afghanistan called Host, where 7 CIA officers were killed by a suicide bomber in December of 2009. I will never forget that there was a plaque on the wall that had a verse from the Old Testament, from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 6, verse 8. And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" And then I said, "Here I am, Lord, send me." That, ladies and gentlemen, is the sound of the trumpet that must summon all of us to action, young and old, soldier and citizen, member of Congress, President of the United States. The call to duty that goes to the heart and soul of our democracy. The responsibility to fight and to never give up fighting until we have an American Renaissance, until the American dream of a better life for our children is real for everyone, and until we have, in Lincoln's words, a true government of, by, and for all people. And it doesn't mean a damn thing unless we're willing to fight for it. Today, you join that fight. My congratulations to the class. God bless you, and God bless our country.